forward progress in D.C. for far too long. He's ready to unite our country and bring the focus back to working families, building for a better future, and getting things done. John and his wife, April McLean Delaney, live in Potomac, Maryland, and have 4 daughters. Please welcome, join me in welcoming Congressman John Delaney.
And let's hear it for Megan. All right. Thank you for the terrific job you're doing, Megan. I really appreciate you having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I feel like I should just take questions at this point. I think it'll go downhill if I give remarks. But it's great to be back here in Knoxville. I was here last year. There weren't as many visitors from out of Iowa here last year as there are now. But it's nice to be here with you. It is great to be here with the terrific Senator Klobuchar, who seems to bring the most beautiful snowflakes with her wherever she goes. So it's nice to see you, Senator. It's Nancy from Wayne County, one of the 4 county chairs that have endorsed me. Nice to see you here. Thank you for making the drive from Wayne County. Let's hear it for Wayne County Chair. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for having me. I've had an opportunity to meet most of you, because I was here last year, and I said hello to most of you all. And since then, I've been to all 99 counties, because I do think Democrats have to campaign everywhere, and you know that. You know that really well here. But for those of you who haven't had an opportunity, or I haven't had an opportunity to meet with, let me introduce myself very briefly. First of all, I'm very different than the current occupant in the White House. And I just don't mean the hairline. Although we do differ there, right? It's a sign of great intelligence. But seriously, I have a plan for the future, and I promise you, I will always tell you the truth. Which isn't that at a minimum what you deserve from your leader, right? To be told the truth. And that's one of the problems we have in our country right now. The truth, which should not be elusive, has become elusive. So let me give you a little bit about my background. I was born, as Megan said, in a blue-collar family. My dad was an electrician, but he was in a union, and that made life good. When I went to college, that union paid for half of my tuition. I would have never been able to go to Columbia University, but for the fact that a bunch of union electricians reached into their pocket every week and threw some money in a hat to pay for one of their own to go to college. After college, I went to law school, where the best thing that ever happened to me happened. I met my wife, whose dad was a potato farmer from Idaho. So the union electrician's son from North Jersey meets the Idaho potato farmer's daughter, only in America, right? And we stayed in Maryland, where we've been blessed with 4 daughters. I was an entrepreneur. I started 2 businesses. I was the youngest CEO in the history of the New York Stock Exchange. But about 10 years ago, my wife and I decided to dedicate the rest of our lives to public service, and I was elected to the House of Representatives from Maryland, where I've had the privilege of serving for the last 6 years. So I have lived the American dream. First in the family to go to college, a successful entrepreneur, and the privilege of serving my country. But that's becoming elusive today. You know, unless we get our act together, the young people in this country will be the first generation of Americans that doesn't do better than their parents. Think about that. If you were born in 1950 in this country, the chances of you earning more than your parents was 90%. Fast forward to 1980, 50%. Today, 20%. Why? The world has changed so fast. The things Andrew Yang talks about, technological innovation, automation, things that are fundamentally changing every aspect of our society, we haven't done anything to prepare our country for these changes. Rural America, as you see in so many parts of our country, has been hollowed out. If I were to tell you that last year in our country, 80% of the money that went to start-up companies went to 50 counties in this country, out of 3,100 counties. Think about that. Out of over 3,000 counties, 50 of them got all the money. That is not a fair society. So unless we get our act together, like my kids, your grandkids, Hopefully one day my grandchildren, my oldest daughter just got engaged the other day, so I'm already kind of thinking about grandchildren. But unless we get our act together, they will not live in the kind of future they deserve. These economic trends are terrible. We're leaving them debts that they absolutely cannot repay, whether they be fiscal debts or climate debts. And they're entering a world where the divisions are so deep in this country that I worry that every future political disagreement might be met with almost violent protests. That's the future we're leaving our children. But I think there's a much brighter future available. And it's up to the Democratic Party to step forward and build it. It's up to the Democratic Party to become the party that's honest about the problems and is honest about the solutions. We have to become the party that is relentlessly focused on results, relentlessly focused on actually getting real things done and being honest with the American people. Right, so when we talk about the need for universal health care, right, which we need in this country, every citizen should have health care as a right, we've got to put forth plans that make sense to make that happen. And not come forward with plans that eliminate private insurance, which 70% of the American people don't want. Right? We have to be honest about the problems, honest about the solutions. When we talk about climate change, which is probably the most pressing issue we have as a nation, and we are running out of time to deal with it, we have to put forth plans that can actually get done, like the bipartisan carbon tax bill that I introduced in the Congress, the only bipartisan significant action on climate in the whole Congress. Right? This can cut carbon emissions by 90%, and we can get it done. We have to put forth realistic plans that can get done. When we talk about education, we got to get behind things that the American people support, like every kid having pre-K is a right, and having something after high school, whether it be free community college or career and technical training. Whether it's building infrastructure or tax policy that makes sense, like doubling the earned income tax credit. We have to become the party of real solutions. Things that make sense, things that are responsive to the issues that we're facing as a society, and things that an overwhelming majority of our country can get behind so that we can actually get things done. We have to become, in my judgment, a party that is described as a bunch of pragmatic idealists. People who want to work hard to build a better future. People who want to come together and create a future that's fundamentally more prosperous and more just and more secure for all of our citizens. But also a party that's actually putting forth real solutions. Things that make sense. Things that can get done. Things that we can rally the American people around. I mean, if you look across history in this country, all the great things we've ever done have happened, whether it be Medicare, Social Security, sending someone to the moon, whatever the case may be. They have all happened when a significant majority of Americans have gotten together and worked on a bipartisan solution. That is how we create enduring progress in this extraordinary country. So if any of you ever decide to run for president, one of the things you'll realize is you get about 50 calls within an hour or two. And they ask you a question. And it's not a question I thought they'd ask. They say, when's your book coming out? And I was like, you mean I gotta write a book now? So I wrote a book. We have a copy of it for everyone. The title of the book is called The Right Answer. And it comes, that phrase comes from a speech that I found that John F. Kennedy gave in 1958. And he gave the speech in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm a member of Congress from Maryland. I was a member of Congress from Maryland. And in that speech he said, we should not seek the Republican answer. We should not seek the Democratic answer. We should seek the right answer. We shouldn't seek to fix blame for the problems of the past. We should own our responsibility as Americans for our future. Right? Beautiful, isn't it? I wish I wrote it. He gave that speech 4 weeks after Sputnik was launched. And if you go back to 1958, that generation of Americans, they were closer to World War II than we are to 9/11. They rightly believed they had just saved the world, because they had. They had an abundance of confidence. And suddenly, with one rocket in space, they were questioning everything. But great leaders like John Kennedy stepped forward and said, you don't have to worry about it. Right? Your future is yours to build. Our future is ours to build. But we have to build it together. We have to build it together. And he reminded the American people that this notion of common purpose and unity is the absolute beating heart of this great nation. Which doesn't mean we're going to agree with each other on everything, because we're not. And we shouldn't want to. We don't want to live in a country where we agree with each other on everything. But what we do, what we deserve, what our children deserve, they deserve to live in a country where their government works for them, where their people come together and actually get things done, where they don't talk about all the problems, but they actually work to build a better future together. This is a magnificent country. We can solve every single problem we have, but we have to solve them all together. And the reason I'm running for president is to be the person who can unify this terribly divided nation, which I think is the central question we face as a people. And in so doing that, not only make us feel better about ourselves, about our government, but actually roll up our sleeves and get down to doing the people's business, which is to create a universal healthcare system, which is to deal with climate change, which is to change the fiscal trajectory of our country, which is to have an agenda to get private and public capital flowing into rural communities, which is to rebuild our infrastructure, which is to ensure that you have digital privacy, which is to create a national artificial intelligence strategy so that the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector are working together to deal with the most transformative change that's going to come down for decades. That is exactly why I'm running for president, to be that person who can bring us together, get back to the battle of great ideas, form the kind of coalitions that are needed to make progress, and work with you and work with everyone to build that better future that we deserve, and most importantly, that our children deserve. So thank you for having me. God bless you. And I think we have time for a couple of questions. Yes, Nancy?
The Democratic Party itself is not united. There are many who are hearing the expression of socialism and are scared by that. Do you have a stand on how to situation?
Well, again, I describe myself as a pragmatic idealist. In other words, Nancy, I want to get big things done in all these areas that I just talked about. But I believe the only way to get it done is to build coalitions. I was ranked the third most bipartisan member of the Congress, something I'm actually pretty proud of. I don't think that's a dirty word. So on most of these issues, yeah, the Democratic Party's having a big debate, but I think that's fine at this point. Right? I don't agree with the Green New Deal. Right? I'll just say. Not that I don't applaud the energy that it's focused on the issue, or the attention that it's focused on maybe the most important issue we have. But I view climate change as a problem that we have to deal with right away. Right? If we don't rebuild our infrastructure, if we wait 5 years to not rebuild the infrastructure in this country, that's a terrible missed opportunity, but it's not going to be that much worse in 5 years. It'll just be bad like it is today. But on climate change, it's an exponential problem. It gets worse and worse every year. So what matters is getting something done. And I proved last Congress that I could build the kind of coalition to actually get a bipartisan carbon tax bill introduced, which has been modeled to cut carbon emissions by 90%, and Republicans have signed on to it. I believe as president I could build a coalition of every Democrat in this country and all the Republicans who represent coastal states, and we can get a bipartisan carbon tax bill passed, which will dramatically slow down climate change. And then I'm calling for a 5-fold increase in the Department of Energy research budget. Because if we want to ever live in a world that is zero carbon, we're going to have to innovate our way into that world. We're going to need massive innovation around battery storage and energy transmission. So it's an example of how I think about things. I share the energy of people who are behind the Green New Deal. I think climate change is an existential threat. But I want to do something about it. I don't want to talk about it. But where are we as a party? We're having a great debate of ideas right now. And I have complete confidence that the Democratic Party will sort through this debate right?